Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the debut record from Black Lava Soul Furnace out November 25th on Season of Mist. The album has 9 tracks, 34 minutes in length, and they are an Australian blackened death metal band. Now if you're a fan of this channel, if you watch my reviews, you've heard me complaining about intro tracks that don't add any value to the album, that don't add any value to the song that follows. Well, this is not going to be one of those because the opening sequence of this record is perfect. If you look at the opening track, the intro track, instrumental song Origins, the sound and the experience that that song has continues into Aurora, the second song on the album. When you have 2 tracks that start off the record in this fashion, the second song creates a little bit of a split personality within it. And what I mean by that is that there's 2 different ways you're going to perceive this song, and there's 2 different experiences you can get from it. If you're listening to the record from start to finish, the song is going to feel extended. Origins and Aurora become just one single track, one-minded, with one direction, with one experience. If you're going at this album from a different angle and you're listening to it on shuffle or through a playlist and Aurora comes up, you still get the essence of the song, but it's just shortened. You're getting more of the Coles notes of what that track is all about. So having an intro like this adds value to the experience of actually listening to the album from start to finish. And that is the purpose of an intro track. Otherwise, why even bother to have it? So this record gives you the perfect starting point for the overall essence of the sound, of the experience, of the atmosphere that the album holds. In between, you're going to have a lot of volatility. In between this tracks, or these 2 songs, and the closing track, you're going to have a lot of volatility. It's a very dynamic record, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of ebbs and flows within songs from song to song. It's a record that never really stays still, but when you have 34 minutes to play with, there's not a lot of room to pause, there's not a lot of room to breathe. You're just trying to get to that finish line in the best way possible, and I honestly felt like the overall engagement of this record really made the experience interesting. At the end, you have Soul Furnace. Of all the songs on this album, that track has specific characteristics that allow it to close the record in a positive note. It has the right design, it has the right sound, the right experience, it has the right vocal performance, it has all the right pieces in order for you to feel like there is an exclamation mark, the album is over, and now it's time for you to perhaps press play and start this journey all over again. So the overall design has the best possible start and a conclusion. This is important. You want to create a sense of direction. It doesn't matter how chaotic it becomes in between, as long as that direction is there at the starting point and it's there at the finish line, the listener can feel connected with the overall experience, can feel connected with the overall path that the album puts forward. This record has the perfect design for the sound that it offers. A sound that it's very gritty. Let me say this, when I looked at this band, I don't see this as a blackened death metal band. I see this as a black metal band with death metal influences. I see it in reverse. Because the soundscape on this record is a lot more connected with black metal than it is with death metal. The production, the grittiness, how raw it is, how driven it is, some of the dark tones in the sound, in the vocal performance, in the lyrical content, all of these elements connect much better with the black metal genre than they do with the death metal genre. But there's still death metal in the sound, there's still death metal in the overall experience of the record sound-wise. So I honestly feel like this album tips the scale a little bit more towards black metal. It felt more of a black metal album to me through and through. Now this experience, this grittiness of sound becomes part of what the DNA of the band is all about. Because the moment you start to look at all the different elements, either be the guitars, drums, or vocals, everything is there with a purpose. This album is not meant to be overly produced. It doesn't need to be over cleaned up. The raw, the gritty, the dirt that it has in its sound, in its vocals, in the overall design, in the overall way in which it's put together, it allows the album to have a dark embrace and allows the album to have a little bit more of something around the edges. It doesn't have smooth edges, it has crooked edges, but that is the beauty of the record and that is the beauty of the sound. So you have to take this album for what it is, and what it is a very down and dirty style sounding record that makes you at times feel slightly uncomfortable with the essence and the atmosphere that it creates. Now, the drums on this album have this ability to find the gray area. They're not overly heavy, as you would expect from a death metal record, and they're also not overly thin or flat or driven, as you would expect from a black metal album. They're somewhere in between. Some moments you see some more thickness, some more heaviness coming through the drums, but never really lasting too long. They come in and they kind of dissipate in the overall soundscape, in the overall feel that the album offers. When they're a little bit more driven, they also don't stay very driven for very long. So it's an album that tries to find drum-wise an in-between, not creating a thick sound, not creating a very heavy sound, but also not creating a very thin sound. Trying to find a medium that has enough texture to please both worlds and allow the band to create a sound that's going to be easy to identify as part of their DNA and who they are going forward. I think this is really important. Not try to sound like somebody else, but try to create something that it's unique to them. And it starts off with this performance as far as the drums are concerned. On the guitar side, a lot of the grit, a lot of the dirt, a lot of the roughness around the edges really comes from the guitars in terms of what they offer and in terms of where they take you. They are a little bit of the motor of this record, or at least they're picking the direction in which you're going to go song in and song out. I love the fact that they change, they give you thickness, they give you drive, they give you melody, they give you darkness. They don't stay consistent, they stay very mobile. You're easy to mold them to what your needs are, song in and song out, and even mold them within songs themselves, which creates tracks that are a lot more dynamic, that are a lot more engaging. This album doesn't have a sense of pattern as you go through it, and that sense of pattern also doesn't really exist or doesn't really define the single construction of every single song. Now, the vocal performance could not be any different from what it is. If you have a record with this style of production, very raw, very unpolished, very gritty, you can have vocals that come over the top and are clean and simple and crystal in terms of how you perceive them as a listener. You need them to be as gritty, as rugged, as dirty as the sound around it is. And the vocal performance on this record is just that. It adds a lot of aggression. A lot of the heaviness comes from the vocal style, from the vocal performance. At times it feels like those vocal cords are being ripped through. They're getting stretched out. But this also adds texture and adds also a little bit more of a footprint to how the overall song sounds. Because there's moments within tracks and there's moments that you see certain songs become perhaps a little bit more narrow in the experience and in the sound that they carry. And then having the vocals do what they're doing allows that experience to expand just ever so slightly so that you still feel like there is volume in the overall creation of sound, in the overall wall of sound that you're hoping that's coming at you. So the vocals play a very important role as far as being the cherry on top that finishes off this entire cake of sound, of music, of atmosphere. All around, when you look at this album as a debut record, it's really interesting because it's an album that allows you to see where they're trying to go as a band and allows you to see that they have the right elements in order to construct an album that has a sense of purpose and a sense of direction. I think for a debut album, this is all that you really want. You want to be introduced to a band that has a vision, that knows what they want, knows how to achieve it, and it's going out and getting it. I still think there's room for them to evolve, and I think they will. I think there's room for them to incorporate other elements, perhaps bringing a little bit more of that death metal into the forefront, allowing that to dictate the sound more than the black metal elements do, or they can stay in this gray area and allow the sound to be a little bit ambiguous as far as which genre is driving it. I think they can go either way with it. Having said all of that, I enjoy this album tremendously. Great debut record. Understanding the design, the length of the record, the style and songs, the vocal performance, everything is in the right place for an album that sounds like this, or for an album that wants to be the way this one is. So great job by Black Lava on their debut record, Soul Furnace. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I have to start off with Aurora. I mean, I've been ranting and raving about these two opening songs, Origins and Aurora, so I have to start with Aurora. But I always want to listen to this song with Origins before. I think it feels more complete. It feels more natural. But it's a great song. great guitar sound, distorted at times, which adds a little bit of a dark and somber vibe to how the track comes across. The vocals come in and add to that dark, somber experience, allowing the track to be methodic with them, more driven without them. And that is the dynamic mechanism that this track offers. It's a very fluid track. It moves really well. Even when it's methodic, it still moves really well. And then having that mechanism that changes the style depending of having vocals on or vocals out really makes the track a lot more interesting and allows the song to feel complete. It's a very balanced song when you think about how it's put together, even if it has those ebbs and flows, because those ebbs and flows stay consistent. That still allows the song to feel balanced all around. Next you have Baptised in Ice, a more driven song, a more to the point song, but still using a lot of dirt, a lot of grime, a lot of distortion to create this very thick wall of sound. I think the interesting element about this specific song is that you can see that wall of sound, and then you can see something breaking away from that wall, and that is the drums. The drums on this track really expand the footprint of the track itself. Sometimes they're closer to the guitars and that wall becomes thicker. Sometimes they move a little bit away from the guitars and then the wall becomes thinner, but the overall footprint of where the wall is becomes a lot bigger. I like this dynamic because it allows them to stay very controlled. It allows them to stay very cohesive as far as the overall song design, but still create movement. It's subtle movement, but movement nevertheless. It enhances the experience, it enhances everything that the track offers. The vocals on this track add a lot of aggression to the song, and that's important because you want something that gives you that sense of intensity, and sound-wise you're going somewhere else, so the vocals really bring you back into that aggression, into that intensity. The bass work on this track really pops. It's very noticeable, and I think it's noticeable because of that movement that the drums have. When the drums are moving away from the guitars, it leaves room between them for the bass to pop, and that's really interesting because it's adding energy, it's adding life, it's adding movement to how the whole track comes together. And this also allows the guitars overall to be a little bit diverse. So when you have this movement of the drums, when you have this popping of the bass, when you have a little bit more of a diverse feel execution put forward by the guitars, you allow the song to have texture. It depends on a lot of elements, but it has a lot of layers working together towards the overall uniformity of one single song. Last but not least, Nightshade, a more atmospheric track for sure. The previous two were more direct, one more methodic, one more driven, but both of them very direct. This one is a lot more atmospheric. This allows the song to go in a very different direction with a different pace. The drums are heavy but not overpowering. The vocals are very dynamic as they are on every single song, but I felt on this one a little bit more because they offer you a different style. I wouldn't say spoken word, but it's a different approach. It's not as stretched out. It's a little bit more controlled, still heavy, but a little bit more controlled. And this dynamic of approaches in the vocals expands the footprint of the vocal range. Is not as controlled, is not as one style or one size fits all. It becomes a lot more dynamic, and this gives a different intensity to the track. It gives a different life to the song, or how you perceive the song. It makes the song connected as well, because you're seeing the movement that exists musically, and then vocally you're feeling the same experience. Those whispering elements of the vocal track really work well in order to impact in a positive way the atmosphere that was already there sound-wise. The two just go towards each other, and that makes the song a lot stronger from that point of view, making that atmosphere really stand out and allowing the song itself to stand out in the crowd from everything else that is around it. This is it, Black Lava Soul Furnace, out November 25th on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.